through the groves of the Faywoods, across the mountains of high tundra, over the waves of the Palladium Sea, through the fields of the tablelands, and into the pine forests of Tenor. Only one species has proven strong and enduring enough to carve hamlets, cities, and nations from the frozen reaches of the north. These are the nations of the mammals. Mammalian myth tells of tribes emerging one by one from the ancient Faywoods, spreading into the harsh northern climates. At this point in history, the Faywoods extended much further east, held in check only by the barren fields of the Salt Barrage and the cold expanse of the tablelands. First came the humans, or Hugh as they're known, who settled the great pine forests along the shores of Pinewater Lake. Then came the Auroch, who crossed into the tablelands and turned the fertile plains into sprawling croplands. This inevitably led to conflict. The Auroch, needing lumber, clashed with the Hughs as they invaded the forests. In open fields, the Hugh were no match for the towering Aurochs, but within the forest, the agile humans could strike from the trees, making every incursion costly. Rather than bleed each other dry, the two races formed an uneasy alliance, born of mutual necessity. The Hughs needed the food the Auroch produced. The Auroch needed the lumber the Hughs controlled. This tentative arrangement hardened into a firm partnership, one that led to the founding of a shared city, Clem, a place where both races could live side by side. To this day, Hughs and Aurochs have remained steadfast allies. But not all who emerged from the Faywoods were so keen for peace. The Kythe, a race of cat-like folk, were keen hunters. They became nomads on the plains, stalking the great mammoths that roamed the region. Unlike the others, the Kythe were obligate carnivores, unable to stomach anything but meat. They saw this primal diet as a sign of superiority, and looked down on the other races who toiled in the fields. Tensions boiled over when a Kythe hunting party slaughtered and consumed an Auroch. War became inevitable. The Auroch, joined by their Hugh allies, drove the Kythe from the plains, forcing them across the sea to the desolate island of Alakast. There, the Kythe tribes took root by hunting the camel herds across the island's cold desert interior. Generations passed and the world grew colder. As a great ice age began, the frost crept south. The Faywoods themselves withered under the encroaching chill, their forests dying back, retreating westward to the border they hold today. This chilling age spurred new migrations. The Chiroptera, great, intelligent bats native to the feral thicket, sought refuge from the cold in the Hugh settlements. Possessing speech and reason, many welcomed the bats as new allies. From the retreating Faywoods came another people, the apes. They emerged not as settlers, but as refugees fleeing the cold. In an alliance with the Hughs, they took to the seas in search of warmer shores, eventually landing on what is now the Haplor Islands. There, their arrival ignited the first recorded war between mammal and reptile as they clashed with the native Enola tribes. At the same time, Hugh also migrated south into the warmer Soltaria region, settling into the mountain foothills and sparking their own conflicts with the Enola. Eventually, the climate began to warm once more. The ice sheets retreated, opening vast western territories for mammal expansion. The tablelands experienced an agricultural and industrial boom, fueling a surge in population across the region. Led by Hugh pioneers, mammals pushed westward and settled the distant lands, laying the foundation for what would later become the Western Mammal Nations. More Hughs crossed the Rye Peaks to join the settlements in the Soltari foothills, intensifying the conflict with the reptiles. The Auroch, meanwhile, took advantage of the warmth to move north, founding what is now the nation of High Tundra, where they made first contact with the reclusive bear tribes of the Arctic frontier. The mammal nations were no longer scattered, independent peoples. Over time, trade routes expanded, old rivalries faded, and a shared identity began to take shape. What were once separate nations slowly transformed into an interconnected society. Lumber and fruit from Tenor, grain from the tablelands, and textiles from the Haplor Islands all flowed through common trade channels, converging into a thriving economy. The city of Clem flourished, becoming the largest city in the world. Its streets teemed with laborers, traders, thinkers, and pilgrims. Even the Kythe, once bitter enemies, began appearing in close-knit enclaves within Clem. Their exile on Alicast had turned them into expert fishers, and Clem's growing population provided a hungry market for their catch. With the surge in population came the need for a new kind of order. The old ways, each nation ruling itself in isolation, could no longer meet the demands of a united society. And so, the mammal nations formed a new government, the Council of Clem. This council was composed of representatives from the Hughes, Auroch, ape, and bat people. With the council came a new era. The mammal nations would no longer mint their own individual currencies. Instead, a shared coinage was issued and accepted across all lands. A new calendar followed. Time would no longer be measured in centuries, but in councils, each lasting exactly 100 years. At the start of every council, a set of families was elected to govern. These families held their seats for the full century, passing responsibilities from parent to child across generations. For example, the 15th year of the Second Council would be recorded as 2C15, Second Council, 15th year. The First Council became known as the Council of Fish and Bread, marking a golden age when a common laborer could earn a week's worth of food in a single day's work. To balance the power of these ruling families, a high chief was elected as the head of the council, expected to serve a 5-year term. The first to hold this was a Hugh named Rawl. His first act as high chief was bold, to bring the Western nations into the fold. The Western territories had begun asserting their independence. Their barons, proud and defiant, refused to be ruled by a distant Eastern council. Chief Rawl was swift. He ordered the Eastern military to occupy the western city of Stormcast, forcing the barons to submit. This act defined his legacy. In the East, Chief Rawl is remembered as a great unifier who was able to unite the mammal nations without bloodshed. In the West, he's remembered as a tyrant. It was during this golden age that another people, the Peroskins, began to appear. These rat-like folk didn't arrive in a single migration, but instead emerged quietly, forming tight-knit communities called clans that formed within the cities. These clans were met with suspicion by the larger mammal races, and for the most part were left to fend for themselves. The Peroskin seemed to prefer it that way, conducting business primarily among their own, and on rare occasion, they would trade with the bats, with whom they shared a quiet understanding. Over time, the rat folk gained a reputation in some niches of society. They were exceptional herbalists and alchemists, known for brewing remedies that could cure ailments once thought incurable. And for those with the right coin and the right connections, the Peroskin employed the most feared assassins in the nations, known as sables. Within this new era, shadows began to form in the mammal nations. Until this time, nearly all mammals practice a form of astral worship, united in their belief in an astral realm where spirits dwell after death. This faith was guided by loosely organized priests known as morals, but in this new era of wealth, a dangerous creed began to take root: vice worship. These cults devoted themselves to mysterious, powerful entities, gods of destructive emotions like gluttony, greed, and lust. At first, such worship was taboo, whispered of only in the depths of the feral thicket or corners of the Faywoods. But as these cults spread, their influence grew, and their members became increasingly destructive. In First Council 22, the Council of Clem faced its first great crisis. Vice worship was banned across all mammal nations. To combat its spread, the council established astromoralicism as the official state religion and created a formal office of spiritual oversight. A new class of state-recognized priests, known as Grand Morals, were appointed to every nation to serve as official guides on astral doctrine. Two major sects of astromoralicism were recognized by Clem. In the East, Kendraic astromoralicism taught a duty to worship only one's own bloodline. In the West, Corporealic astromoralicism saw all mammals as one united family and established a class of revered heroes known as Domini, whom all were invited to honor as ancestors. To crush the vice cults, the council also empowered a new order of reverent warriors, the lecturers. Along with the national armies, they scoured the land, and the colts were broken. Though small pockets are said to persist, they remain outlaws, hidden in the darkest parts of the wilds. Prosperous times continued, but with them came growing pains. Few settlers in the Solteri pushed further south, clashing once again with the Enola jungle clans. But this time, the Enola were not alone. They were backed by unified Zairi and Tortalan forces, all led by a Zairi warlord named Maladon Thar, a name now cursed among mammals. This new reptilian army sought to drive the mammals out and unify the entire peninsula under their rule. Fearing this army would soon cross the Rye Peaks and threaten the Heartlands, the Council of Klim responded. For the first time in history, the mammal races pooled their strength, forming a united army to defend their lands. In First Council 79, the Foothill Wars began. Creatures of fur and scale clashed in brutal campaigns, but the dense jungles favored the reptiles. The mammal forces fought valiantly, but were ultimately driven from the Solteri. A new power had risen, the Sarathi Empire. The council was forced to confront the reality that the reptiles were no longer scattered tribes, but a unified, dangerous force. In a desperate diplomatic move, the council turned to the Avarian city-state of Paradise, hoping the birdfolk might act as neutral mediators. But the Avarians were already trading with this new empire. They took some sympathy on the mammals, but ultimately took no sides in the conflict. Generations passed, and the Western mammal nations gradually developed their own identity, drifting further from the influence of the Eastern realms. Amid this shift, a new group of Hues emerged from the Faywoods and established the southwestern nation of Moorland. It was in this arid region that a Peroskan clan founded a city of their own, Rodenbale, the first city the Peroskans could call their own. Many migrating Auric also settled in the region, drawn by the fertile land during the winter seasons, when the tablelands grew too cold to farm. Amid this fresh landscape, a new faith took root. An Auroch named Boss founded Unisaic Astromoralicism, a breakaway sect that claimed him the greatest of all Domini, an ancestor for all mammals to revere. What truly sets the mammals apart from other civilizations is the unique level of racial equality they have achieved. But beneath this broad acceptance lies an even deeper foundation, the central importance on kinship. The most deeply held belief among mammals is the sanctity of the family. Their core religion centers on reverence for ancestors, making strong, kindred bonds not just a virtue, but a sacred duty. Mammals will go to great lengths, sometimes even sacrificing their lives, to aid even distant kin. This devotion fosters a sense of community unlike any other in the world. This deep-rooted loyalty to family, however, is not without its drawbacks. Nepotism is widespread in mammal society, openly accepted and even expected. This mentality is captured by the phrase, "The forest endures because the roots of one tree grow into another. So too must our governance, pass not to strangers, but to kin." Those with ties to powerful families rise quickly, while individuals without blood ties often find it nearly impossible to better their standing. Orphans, or those without complete family structures, are among the most neglected in mammal society. Without even a modest family connection to a trade, employment can be incredibly difficult to obtain. And with this devotion comes a strict set of duties for men and women, especially in the Eastern nations, where traditions hold firm. In both the East and the Western realms of Averholm and Automark, women are unable to cast votes in societal affairs, or for national ones, such as council or high chief, and leadership roles are almost exclusively reserved for men. Women are also expected to bear and raise children for the next generation, but not without accommodation. Scattered across the mammal nations are kinwells, quiet, protected spaces reserved for women, girls, and boys not yet of age. More than mere buildings, kinwells offer rest, care, and privacy for mothers, their children, and caregivers. Though they vary by region, all kinwells are revered as sacred spaces, tied to the astral plane. Men, on the other hand, are expected to serve as the primary laborers and, when called upon, to defend the nations through military service, often at great personal cost. An exception to nearly all gender and family expectations can be found in the Peroskin clans. These rat folk possess little concept of marriage or traditional family structures and show minimal interest in astral moralicism. Despite this, Peroskin enclaves among the mammal nations are known for their unshakable loyalty to one another and their tight communal bonds. These bonds, however, are just not based in blood, but on the clans. In the year Second Council 91, the prosperous times came to a violent end. The time of crisis had begun. Bat scouts began arriving in the chief's hall of Klim with grim news. Sarathi armies were invading by land and sea with a singular goal: to capture Klim before summer's end. Worse, the Sarathi had aligned themselves with the insect god queens. A second invasion poured into Moorland and Hamleton, opening a devastating new front, while a third swept through the Cayenne Stretch. Attacked from three sides, the mammal nations were quickly overwhelmed. For the first time in their history, they faced the threat of extinction. In desperation, the northern races set aside their remaining differences. Hugh, Auroch, Peroskin, Ape, Bat, and even Kythe warriors united in a last-ditch effort to repel the invaders. By late summer, the Sarathi had surrounded Klim, laying siege to the great city. An Auroch named General Rygard led the defense, holding the walls for weeks with unwavering resolve. His efforts were valiant, and under his command, the city no doubt held out far longer than anyone believed possible. Even so, Klim would have surely fallen had it not been for the miracle that occurred. As if the land itself rose to protect its children, a late summer frost swept across the eastern nations, blanketing the land in an early, unnatural snow. While the warm-blooded mammals endured it, the cold-blooded reptiles were caught completely unprepared. The cold was so sudden, it said that mammal warriors simply walked into the Sarathi camps to find their enemies frozen in their beds, sluggish and unable to fight back. General Rygard led the united forces south, shattering the remaining Sarathi armies and driving them back over the Rye Mountains. The now liberated eastern forces then redirected their full might westward, crushing the slowed insect armies and forcing them back into the Witherlands. This stunning victory united the mammal nations as never before. The Council of Klim decreed the formation of a single, unified army, the Klim Guard, named for the city that had become a symbol of their survival. The Kythe, who had proven themselves cunning and lethal warriors during the city's defense, were finally granted representation on the upcoming Third Council on the condition that they renounce the cannibalism of other mammals. The Peroskins, whose scouts and assassins provided critical intelligence and struck decisive targets during the battle, were likewise hailed as heroes of the war. However, persistent rumors of their involvement in vice magic led to their continued exclusion from the Council of Klim, making them the only mammal race denied formal representation. In response, the Peroskin withdrew deeper into their clan packs, choosing to influence society from the shadows rather than from the council seats they were barred from. From that day forward, the phrase, "the nation's call," became a sacred expression of unity, a reminder of their shared duty. To this day, those words are often all that is needed to end a dispute between any two mammals. The conflict ended everywhere except the Cayenne Stretch, where the Enola of Soul's End and the apes of the Haplor Islands clashed for decades onward. This conflict came to an end in Third Council 57, when an ape chieftain named Chief Tosser formed an alliance with High Holtaskinsis, a powerful Enola politician who had grown weary of her people's oppression under the Sarathi Empire. Together, they made an unprecedented pact, dividing the Cayenne Stretch between the two species. The Enola would inhabit the dense jungle floor, while the apes claimed the canopy above in their high-reaching jungle villages, as well as the port city of Morilini, marking the first formal treaty between scale and fur. Now, in the year Third Council 66, the mammal nations remain strong. But a divide begins to form between the eastern and western mammal nations once again, threatening the long peace the nations had enjoyed. Meanwhile, to the south, the Sarathi Empire has long since recovered from its defeat and now enters a golden age and has begun expanding its territories with renewed ambition. Will the mammal nations remain united, or will they face the fate that comes when their kind divides? Howdy friends, so this video was a lore breakdown from the world of my upcoming novel, Grovekeeper. What you just saw was the history of one of its major factions, the Mammal Nations. I'm also quite thrilled to announce that Grovekeeper is now available to read for free. I'm releasing it chapter by chapter on the website Royal Road, so come and take your very first steps into the massive world of Amnio and explore the deep forests of the Feylands where more of this story unfolds. This book has been in the making for years, and I just can't tell you how excited I am to finally just share it with everyone. You can find a link to it in the description below. And if you want more lore, you can see the lore of the reptiles, the Sarathi Empire here. And also, stay tuned for my next lore video where I'm going to be diving into the insect queendoms, their history, culture, and their place in the world of Amnio. So other than that, I thank you for your time, and I will see you guys next time.